So, when we left off on the last decompression chamber, I was having this grand realization that I can get so far ahead of myself on work that now I get to experiment and do other fun things, explore other avenues of art. Not so much exploring other talents I might have, but trying to develop new talents that I don't have, such as being able to draw and create music and do other stuff like that. I had forgotten to list on the last part that learning Japanese should be something I do at some point in the near future, you know, with all this extra allotted time. You hear that? Loud ass fucking car. See, decompression chamber is often recorded during the day, unlike most of my stuff. And I always forget that a part of why I don't record during the day is that I live on a fucking major road, so there's constantly loud cars and shit. So yeah, I was talking about developing all these other talents, and so that's what I've been working on mostly for the last week. It's really interesting because it feels like I'm putting a lot more effort into other things not related to my main content that you guys have been seeing, and yet it seems impossible to slow down my main content. Like, not that I'm like trying to or anything, but it's amazing how I can do other things and the other stuff will just naturally come, you know? I mean, there's been a Digibros video every day. There will be all month. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But like for up until the previous podcast, there was like this long period where I had at least 2 videos out every day. You know, like 1 Digibros and 1 normal video. And I thought that maybe that would slow down if I started working on these other projects. Hasn't slowed down at all. In part because there's just so much stuff that I get attached to, you know. The Wave Motion Cannon podcast finally fucking came out. The first half of it anyways. I don't know why the second half is not coming out till next year, apparently, or why it takes him so long to edit them, considering he didn't really cut anything. So, I have no idea why that is, but it's finally out in some capacity, you know. Main channel video came out, bunch of After Dark stuff came out, and it's like, it just kind of happens, because, I mean, with the vlogs, it could just, you know, sometimes I just turn on a camera and rant for 20 minutes, and that's such a minuscule part of my day to do that, you know, that it's like, oh, a 20-minute video came out, you know, without me even having to think about it, just because it came to mind, you know. There's other stuff I've just been doing on the side. I can't even really remember what a lot of what I put out this past week was, because I've been so focused on this other stuff. I've been practicing drawing. Been drawing at least 1 picture a day for the last few days. Just bought a tablet, so an expensive one with a screen on it. So hopefully that'll be cool. And I learned how to fucking use Fruity Loops, the music production program that Shade uses to produce all his beats, and is very common. It's used by a lot of people. And it's funny because it has a totally alien interface, so whenever I watched him working on it, I was like, I don't understand any of this, and maybe I never will. But of course, once I installed it, you know, it took me like 5 hours, and I learned basically everything, so it wasn't that hard to use. And it's interesting because I feel like I have a head start in a lot of these categories because of the fact not only that I analyze them professionally, you know, so I kind of know what is supposed to happen for it to be good, but I also have a lot of history in, like, adjacent things. Like, you know, I may not have been using FL Studio or using any, like, professional materials, but I have been making beats for, like, 5 years now, you know, like, mostly a cappella or weird shit that I make in Audacity, and it's kind of interesting how FL Studio, you know, just gives me the tools to do the same shit I've been doing much easier and with better sounds, you know. So it's not hard. And I understand, you know, I may not know music theory. I don't know how to make a chord, for instance, or a chord progression, but there's a lot of stuff I can do with sampling and simple beat making that just comes totally natural to me. I just get it, you know. It's not, I keep thinking like, wow, this is easy, but then I think, well, maybe for a lot of people it wouldn't be, who don't have any musical experience. It probably would be a lot more difficult to know what sounds right, or, you know, something like that, but for me, it feels very natural to make music. So that is really cool, and it's been fun, and I've made a bunch of songs. Drawing, on the other hand, does not come naturally at all, but again, I do have some basic understanding. It helps I took a lot of art classes. You know, aside from just basic art in high school, I also took, like, design classes, both for traditional and digital media in college. So, you know, I understand the basics. I know what I'm doing wrong, is what I'm saying. Like, you know, I can draw a shitty picture and be like, okay, well, you know, the proportions are off here and here, and I got the, you know, this isn't quite sized right, and I know what's wrong with it, which is more than I think is true for a lot of people who are shitty artists. You know, it's not... I think the most important thing to getting better in any medium is understanding what your faults are. Like, that's the easiest way to help you improve, is if you know what you've done wrong. And it's amazing how many people don't. How many people try to do something and then they completely don't realize what the problems are, you know? And that makes it really hard. It's really hard to get better that way, you know? And it's why when people come to me for advice on things like writing, I've always had a really difficult time with it. I'm not good. I mean, I am good at giving advice. I'm not good at wanting to give advice because, you know, I'm sure you realize that I have fans constantly asking me, like, you know, to check out their thing, tell them what's wrong with it or something like that. And too often the answer is like some kind of fundamental misunderstanding or just needing to change the way you think about your writing. Like, there's a lot that you only pick up on with lots of experience and studying how other people write. Don't just, like, listen to other people who write, but study how they write. Study, like, read your thing and then read their thing, and then, like, if you don't think yours is as good, figure out why it's not as good. Because so many people will send me something, and, like, what they're expecting to be wrong with it is something simple. But what's actually wrong with it is something fundamental, you know? And that is very difficult to break that news to someone. That's why I don't like giving criticism, because no one realizes how harsh the criticism is going to be. No one realizes, like, the depth on which I'm going to have to break down their stuff. Where, I mean, for some people it's just not having good ideas. For some people it's, like you know, just fundamentally not understanding how to be interesting. For some people it's not understanding just how to grammar or syntax well, or to sentence a structure in an interesting way, or to be thought-provoking, or to, like, structural problems are everywhere. I mean, the biggest thing is just simplifying all the bullshit out. Newbie writers put so much stuff that's completely unnecessary into their scripts, and I've talked about that in the Tips to Write Gooder video, that just, like, the biggest things that bother me are erroneous details that are completely unnecessary. But nonetheless, I think I am pretty good at recognizing my own problems, and I'll tell you about this incredibly sad story that me and Ben Saint encountered recently. And I don't want to, like, slag on this person, but I just think it's a really fascinating example of what I'm talking about. We were on Tapastic, which is this comics uploading website. It's like a place for webcomics to find an audience, essentially. And Ben has his comics on there. He doesn't take it very seriously because it really hasn't helped his, like, Patreon growth that much to have his stuff up there. But one of his comics recently became, like, on the hot page kind of thing of Tapastic, his comic The Champion. And we were looking at other stuff on the website and just kind of, like, you know, trolling through and looking at what's what. And we stumble upon this webcomic called, like, Diaries of an Aspie Girl or something like that. And it's a fairly long-running comic with just absolutely abysmal artwork. Like, the worst possible artwork that it could possibly have. It looked garish. And I mean, the writing's not spectacular. It's just kind of an autobiographical, except not, like, you know, it's like a story about a character who was obviously the writer, like, based around the writer and how she perceives herself. But we were looking at the the forums. We came upon it. I don't remember if we came upon it from the comic itself or from the forums, but she had a forum post that was like, why is my comic not more popular? And she writes like a few paragraphs about it. And her idea of why the comic's not popular is because she's not marketing it well. She was like, I know marketing's important, but, you know, it seems to me like there's people who put a lot, like, you know, I'm putting so much effort into this. Why is nobody reading it? It seems like there's people who are putting so much effort into, or so much less effort into their work, who are just getting really big really fast. And then we looked through the responses, and it took a long time before we got to someone who had the balls to just say, the artwork is not very good. No one was saying it. All of them were hitting her with shallow platitudes about how, like, oh, well, you know, if you try to, you know, maybe strategize, or people tend to like stuff that's, that fits into what they already kind of like, you know, so maybe you have to chase what people are really... No, the artwork is unbelievably bad. That's the problem, you know, and it took a long time before somebody even suggested that. And that's the most harmful thing that could happen to an artist, is both not understanding what their problem is, and then also no one being willing to tell them what their problem is, you know. But it's rough, because I bet that she'd be resistant to it. You know, most of the time when people come to me looking for advice, and I give them advice, a lot of them are resistant, or a lot of them just kind of give up, you know, once they realize, like, that the issue is they haven't been writing for long enough. Then it's like, oh, well, I can't change that. You know, I can't just edit that in my script immediately. It's like, your problem is that you're young and you just started, and therefore everything you write is going to be terrible for the next 5 years. You know, like, that's the real issue here. Revisit this idea further down the road when you've matured as a writer. Like, not easy advice to give anybody, but pretty much exactly the case. Nobody's that great when they first start, and if they are, they can probably recognize their own problems and improve them more quickly, you know, or they just need one or two little hints and then they'll be on their way, you know. Now, my problem as an artist is that I've been doing it for 5 days. I'm, you know, only using other people's art as base for mine. Like, I'm just copying, you know, poses and stuff. And it's going to take a long time before I'm good enough for my work to be presentable. You'll notice that I haven't been posting any of these artworks anywhere, because they're not good. They're not presentable. They are at best charming, you know, like, and I'm drawing this character who's part of a story that I'm working on. This fiction story. I kind of hinted that I was going to go down that road on the last podcast, and I've been trying to, like, nail down what this character looks like and feels like. So I've just been drawing the character over and over again, and will continue to do so probably for months. You know, I will probably draw this character at least once a day, hopefully more than once a day, for like 3 or 4 months before, you know, the artwork will be of a quality that is even presentable. You know, and when this thing comes out, because art will be important to it, I need to be able to draw for this piece of work. Even when it comes out, the artwork's not going to be great. The artwork is going to be mediocre. You know, it is going to be a project released with mediocre artwork of a newbie artist. And if I continue drawing, then eventually I might release something with good artwork. But this will not be that. I understand all that. I'm not out to make something good here, you know, like conventionally. I'm not out to make something that's perfect, especially not in terms of the art. The art will probably be the least important aspect of it, or at least the least quality aspect of it. You know, it's going to have music that's okay. It's going to have music that uses all the experience I've built up as a musician, but that's not a lot. You know, you're not going to hear super memorable chords and melodies that I invented by myself. That won't be a thing in it. So yeah, it's not going to be amazing, and I understand that. And I wish more people had that level of self-criticism to, you know, instead of asking me what's wrong with their work, just accept that they're not going to make anything good for a while, and they should not even, don't even bother asking me. You know, come to me when you've been working for 5 years and you like feel like you're about to have a breakthrough, or you're on the cusp of a breakthrough, but there's just one or two things you think you need to tweak, you know, and maybe that's the kind of thing I could help a lot more with. Fellow PCP member Tommy Oliver is writing a book right now. You know, he sent me a chapter of it. He is someone I could work with because he's already got a basis of, like, he's pretty good. You know, he's a pretty good writer, fiction writer. I'm more so than being good at writing fiction, I'm much better at editing it. I'm much better at, like, helping people revise something that's already there because, again, I analyze this stuff for a living. You know, like, I am good at that aspect. I could totally edit your novel. It just has to be on a certain level of, like it has to be something that is basically good. It just needs to be fixed in some ways, you know? Someone like Tom, I could tell him, like, hey, maybe think about changing the word choice in this sentence. It actually is like that, you know, which is what I think people imagine it's going to be when they show me stuff, and it's usually not like that. You know, really, you should be sending stuff that, well, I mean, don't send me anything because I'm not going to look at it. But so yeah, forget that whole line of thought, because, like, this is stuff. When people ask me to look at stuff, what they don't seem to understand is that editors, that's a job. That's a job that people get paid to do. That's a skill set. You know, being able to edit someone's work and look at it and understand what's wrong with it and help them to fix it is something that most people would pay for. You know, if you're working professionally. And aside from the fact that I'm not a professional editor and I don't have time, if I was, I would expect to get paid. You know, because I do think I could do that. I think I could be an editor. It's a career choice I've considered if whatever I'm doing doesn't work out. The biggest problem with being an editor is that the writers hate you. You know, like, unless there's someone who really prizes the idea of an editor, they're gonna hate you. And also, I always want everything to be to my taste. You know, I'm not good at editing for like what I think the audience will want most. I mean, I guess I could probably do that, but, like, I really like to push my own agenda when it comes to seeing other people's work, you know. That's why I don't do it that much even for my friends. But God, I don't know how I got onto that tangent about editing. Right, I was talking about this art and music I've been making. Really surreal experience, though, making things that nobody gets to see again. Like, this is something I've experienced it in the past. Back when I wanted to be a fiction writer, I have all these stories that have never seen the light of day. That, you know, I mean, that fucking novel I wrote back in 2010, nobody had ever read it until, you know, now that people are listening to it and offering comments on the subreddit, which has been great. It's been really fulfilling to finally get people talking about that story. And I might talk about a couple more eventually, though none of them are nearly as written as that one was. God, I've considered even doing an audio version of Cyrano and Purple Steve, which is highly incomplete, but I really like what there is of it. If you don't know what that is, you'll maybe learn eventually. But yeah, what the fuck am I talking about? Holy shit, I've completely lost track of where I was going with that. Oh yeah, making stuff that nobody gets to see. I'm sure most people experience this all the time. Like, if you work on bigger projects or something, or if you're someone who, you know, gets an idea in your head and it doesn't get fully realized until later, then, like, I guess it's pretty common to have these things that they don't get to be seen by anybody. But I've gotten used to this fast-paced, I make something, immediately release it to my audience, immediately get feedback, and it's done. And now I'm like, I've made a bunch of songs that are on the internet. I've posted them on the internet. They're online. They're just not under my name. And there's a good reason for it, because they're all tied into this story I'm working on, and I don't want to release them publicly until there's more context for why they're there. Because if you were to just go and listen to these right now, you'd be like, why? You know, why this song? But if you understand the context of the story and how they're going to be used in the story, then it'll make a lot more sense. So yeah, those won't come out till later. But they're decent. They're decent little songs. I've listened to them, you know, a number of times, not just because I made them, but I think they're kind of neat. They're very simple. But yeah, like, it's interesting to have released content online that nobody's looking at. And I kind of would love for those songs and the account they're associated with to, like, gain some fandom by themselves without me even doing anything. It's impossible, though. Like, there's no way to grow a channel without any word of mouth, without showing it to anybody, you know? So, yeah, I have no idea if that'll even be possible. Most likely nobody's going to see these songs until the work is complete, along with anything else I do for it until then, or these drawings, or anything else I'm doing. So, yeah, it's a weird experience, and it doesn't really show. Because, again, it hasn't taken away from anything. Like, main channel videos aside, you know, I used to be worried that, like, vlogs were going to take away from the main channel. And that didn't, I mean, I guess that happened a little bit back in, like, August when I barely made any videos just because I wasn't up for it. I was, like, way more into the idea of vlogging. I was getting ready for RadCon. I was excited about people moving in. And then, like, that, what I was going to do with vlogging, I kind of lost interest in. Once everything had kind of transpired, but the vlogs did not interrupt the main videos once I got back to work on them. You know, they've been coming out consistently, and then I was worried that the art and the other stuff would get in the way of the vlogs, but that also hasn't happened, because it turns out that vlogging and getting out podcasts is something that I do so second nature. Like, it doesn't even occur to me that I'm doing it. There's no, like, preparation for any of the videos I do. Like, I feel like other people have to psych themselves up and get ready. You know, they have to, like, think about what it's gonna be and prepare. I barely do that. Like, when it comes to a vlog, I get an idea, I turn on a camera, I rant. There's very little, like, fully thinking out the point. Sometimes that can be to the detriment of the video. Some of my vlogs are a little too rambly. They kind of don't really make the point as solidly as I would like. But I've gotten better and better at it. And even stuff like the edited ones, like the mindless self-indulgence one. Like, you know, I knew all that stuff, so I could go through it, but I did not, like, pre-plan everything I was gonna say. I just kind of sat down, turned on the camera, and went, and it came out really great. And something like Handfuls of Zen has, like, some notes taken, and I had to play through the whole game. But aside from that, you know, didn't take that much thought, because I'm already, again, it's like automatic. So these things just come out as they are, and they're not affected by this other artwork I'm doing, which is really good. That's exactly what I wanted, and it's been great. I don't know exactly what I'm doing for the next week. Devu just I guess it's already been 2 days. Devu went home to see his parents for the holidays. He's not going to be gone that long, though. He like talked them out of making him stay too long. But I gotta have another video written for him probably by the time he gets back, and then start working on possibly building another backlog like I did with November, and just giving myself the agency to do all this stuff, because the story that I'm working on, that I'm doing all these drawings and music for, is the story itself is very small, but the project is big, if that makes sense. Like, you know, one of the fascinating things about art is that the sort of the quality of it, or the amount of it, is not really proportional to how much effort it takes. Like, you can make an analysis video that's like the coolest video that you'll see all year, and that analysis video might only take like 2 days to make. Whereas a chapter of a comic that's like the coolest chapter of a comic you saw all year probably took at minimum a month. You know, probably more than a month, but at minimum a month to make. So it's interesting that, like, the audience reaction to each of those could be about the same. Takes about 15 minutes to watch the video, takes about 15 minutes to read the comic chapter. You know, both of them have a certain level of impact, but one, just by necessity of what it is, took way more effort and time. And I think that's one of the most difficult things for a lot of artists to reconcile with, and it causes a lot of elitism because, you know, in the minds of a lot of artists, they're like, I worked so much harder, I deserve, you know, more reward. But really, the quality of the final product is not all that affected by how much work went into it. You know, I mean, it can be. Sometimes what makes it great is how much work went into it. But it's not the only way to make something good. You can make something good in a million different ways. You can make something great that's spontaneous, you know? A lot of great music is all about improvisation and just having a general understanding of how to perform. And, you know, spontaneity can be amazing for art, but some of it has to take a long time. And it really just comes down to what you like doing. Do you like making short-form art or long-form art? If you like making long-form art, I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry for you. You've trapped yourself in a hell. But, you know, I mostly make short-form art. But this one that I'm working on, the nature of the project will make it a much larger project than normal. You know, it'll take longer to make than it would take me to make any analysis video because of the nature of the project. Even though the story itself will be this really small, self-contained story that will probably be consumable in like 2 to 4 hours. It will not be long. But like just the number of skills that I have to develop to even make it possible is a huge element of it. So yeah, that's a fun paradigm to explore, and it's not something I would have been willing to do for any of the last 3 years, you know, or more, because I would have been scared that it would get in the way. But now that it doesn't look like it will, I can just take my time with it. I'm not in a huge rush to develop these skills, but I'd like this project to be done within the next like 6 months. So I'm gonna at least try to work fast and hard enough to get it done within 6 months. But besides that, yeah, it can take its time and feels good, man. Alright, I'm kind of just repeating what I said on the last podcast at this point, but I'll cut the clip here and I'll only record if I find something totally new and interesting to talk about between now and whenever this comes out. Probably late. I apologize if this podcast can get a bit repetitive at times. I mean, when it's just me talking about my life, and my life is kind of the same week in and week out, a lot of the information is going to be kind of repetitive. But, I mean, in a way, what is storytelling if not just, you know, constantly recontextualizing the same sort of basic human ideas in different ways to unpack different nuances from them? You know, it's hardly surprising that one storyteller will have a lot of commonality among their stories, especially if they put one out every fucking week. It's funny because in some ways this is my favorite show to do, because it's the closest to just what's on my mind at any given time. This podcast is just raw Digibro. Ben said recently, I don't remember if I told this story on here. I came downstairs and said, like, I was telling Ben something, and then I was like, yeah, I just explained it on the Decompression Chamber, and he was like, you know, listening to the Decompression Chamber and talking to you in person, it's essentially the same experience. You get a lot of, like, repeat information between the two, and I'm like, yeah, it's basically exactly the stuff I talk to my friends about, and the stuff I talk about in general. Which in some ways is a sign that the Decompression Chamber is kind of waning in its importance. When I first started it, it was around the time that Ben and Devu had been here for like a month. Because I started this in late October, so around 2 months. But I still wasn't quite, I don't know, I wasn't completely, you know, comfortable talking to them about everything at that point yet. I wasn't like constantly sharing what was going on with me and stuff like that. Victor wasn't around for a while, so, you know, he's the one I'd usually talk to about a lot of this stuff. And what's great about the Decompression Chamber is that, as I explained in a previous episode, it really gives me the chance to be, like, unfiltered and talk in a way that is not the same as how I talk to other people necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of overlap. Like I just said, Ben has, you know, said that talking to me is practically the same thing. But it's not me trying to put on a show and like be about a topic that the other person can relate to. Let's put it that way. Like when we do Digibros, I usually try to involve Victor on some level. But on this podcast, it's just me talking about my life. So this is by far the closest you're getting to what it's like, the exact experience of talking to me in person. Especially the lack of response from the other side. The one-sided nature of the conversation is also true to life. But nonetheless, it is fun to do. And that's kind of what's keeping it going. Like, I don't know that it's a great show or that it has a lot of unique ideas. It's just kind of fun to do, but I can't see it living too long. I don't think this show's going to be around well into 2017 or anything. I also think that probably Digibros is just going to get shut down. I mean, it seemed like an inevitability at one point when we thought Victor was going to move away, and like we were saying, you know, Digibros is going to end because he's going to leave to go to college, or to go to grad school rather. And that didn't end up happening. So Digibros got to live a little longer, but then we ended up putting it on hold for like 2 months because we were just busy. And then we finally got back to it, and it doesn't really seem like anybody cares anymore. Like this Bomberman Let's Play we've been doing, the view counts are at like an all-time low. Comments are at an all-time low. We barely get any comments. And I mean, reading comments, I'm sure I've said this about all the work I do, but like, comments are really what let me know that people are engaging with it. You know, if I don't get any comments, I don't feel like anybody really cares that much. Like, people are just kind of throwing it on and you know, passively listening to it, because it just means we weren't necessarily engaging enough to like provoke a discussion. I don't know. Maybe that's just not the way people, you know, interact with Digibros, but we used to get more comments than we get now. And, you know, I'm not watching them back. I don't think Victor's watching them either. It used to be that we'd both watch a lot of them, or our friends would watch them. Nobody I know is watching them, you know. I think Hippo might be, but even he's been saying that he has to cut back on his Digibro content because there's so fucking much of it. So, yeah, I don't see Digibro surviving because there's not much incentive to do it. And most of the stuff, like, I don't think our discussions have been that great in the Bomberman playthrough, because at this point, I run so many shows where I get out like all the really salient things I want to talk about. Like when Digibro started, I didn't have vlogs coming out all the time. I didn't have you know, 3 fucking podcasts that I'm on. And so it made sense. Like, I had all these backed up topics that I just bust out on the show, and now most of those are things I would make vlogs about, because I do want those things to be out there, and a vlog is just going to perform way better. Like, you know, on some level, it's like I feel bad. Like, you know, Victor said the reason we have nothing to talk about is because you constantly make podcasts and vlogs. And I'm like, yeah, those podcasts and vlogs get way the fuck more views, you know? So it's like the stuff was kind of just exist. Like, we were doing what, for my money, is one of the best Let's Play shows on YouTube. Like, I really think Digibros was one of the strongest Let's Play shows that's ever been. It was basically just a podcast, but a really fun podcast with 2 brothers who, you know, had tons of running gags and fun things to talk about, but it never got any attention. It never grew. It stayed at like this really steady viewer base the whole way through, never grew any bigger. You know, and when it goes away, people aren't that excited when it comes back. You know, when it was gone, people kept asking me about if it was going to come back, but then it came back and no one was like, oh, Digibros, finally! You know, it was just kind of like, oh, yeah, you guys are playing Bomberman, that's cool, you know. And I'm sure if we'd come back with, like, the Dark Souls 3 DLC, people would be more excited. And I keep getting asked, like, why aren't you guys doing the Dark Souls 3 DLC? We didn't want to do it. Like, Victor thought it was too hard, and it's only 1 level, and he was like, let's just wait for all 3 of them to come out, and then we could do all 3, because they're going to make 3 DLCs for the game. But it's like, if you guys are, if people only care about the game and not actually about the show, because the game is fucking completely inconsequential on Digibros. It's just a podcast show, you know? And it used to have all these really interesting topics that to me were like, these should be on a bigger stage. Like, this is such a good podcast show. And that's why we did like the Digibros Discuss Berserk video, which got huge. That video really took off. And that was a discussion that would have happened on Digibros. Like, we were going to talk about that. And then I said, why don't we just make this its own video? And people probably love it. And they did. You know, we did the same thing with the Ghostbusters podcast, which, you know, was somewhat successful. It was not that great because I was a total asshole and played devil's advocate the whole time. But you know, those are shows that I knew had potential to gain some kind of, you know, attraction, where Digibros was not gaining any. And at this point, it's like, now that I'm taking all the best stuff, that like the stuff that made Digibro great, now that I'm taking those discussions out of Digibros and putting them in other places, you know, Digibros itself is not only worse, but even less popular. So doesn't seem like there's much reason to keep it going. I mean, me and Victor, the story is always the same when it comes to just our personal lives, you know. I'm always making videos, and he's always struggling to find work. It's always what it's going to be. So at this point, it seems like there's no real reason to keep it running. And there is the Digibro and Others show with Devu, which Devu is way into the idea of doing more Let's Plays. And I think we might continue doing it if he's willing to, like, edit them and stuff. Because for me, it's just a matter of, like, you know, we're going to sit down and play a game and talk for 3 hours. And that's already in itself like a huge time investment of time that I could be spending working on other videos that will be relevant, that will get attention, that will explore the ideas I want to explore, you know. And then after those 3 hours, I have to edit all that and break it up into chunks and post it online, you know. And part of the appeal of Digibros was just that it was a way for me and Victor to hang out. Me and Devu can hang out anytime. We can have these discussions anytime we want. You know, with him, it's just a show we're doing. So there's even less incentive for me to keep it going. But if Devu wants to keep doing it, I mean, I can show up and play a game and talk, you know. That's a huge part of why I still do the pub crawl, is because I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is show up and drink and talk to my friend, you know. And it's the way I keep up with Cider. I don't really talk to him outside the pub crawl, except for like a few lines here and there, you know, each week, because I know that we'll catch up on the pub crawl and we'll have all the stuff to say there. So like with Devu, it's like I hang out with him every day. There's not a huge incentive for us to do a show together. So yeah, that's why those shows may or may not continue. And this one, like, a lot of what I express on the show is gonna get repetitive. It's gonna end up being a lot of the same stories. It's gonna be the same thoughts about life. And I'm not dissatisfied with this show's view count at all. I like both the nature of the show and the view count on it, but I would, you know, if I get into other stuff and this podcast is in the way, or if this podcast waned a little bit in viewer retention, I'd just cancel it. You know, there's not a huge need for this show to run forever, because it will eventually wear out its welcome. But we'll see how long that takes. I'm thinking maybe it'll just be a 1-season thing, like a 12 episode, like a, you know, like a proper show. Maybe a season that could be renewed in the future if I feel the need for it again. I mean, when I started this thing, it was because I really felt I needed to relax and decompress, and the best way I could think to do that was with a podcast. Now I don't really feel I need it anymore. Now I'm just kind of doing it for kicks, you know? And occasionally when I have a thought that I go, oh, that thought would make a decent podcast, let's talk about that. So I had a thought in the car on the way home from getting some pizza just now about happiness and the nature of it, and how it's perceived. Because I really think that from an outside perspective, my life must either look idyllic or crazy. It's gotta be like one of those, right? Either you're thinking, well, he's living his dreams, he's making, you know, a good income, he's doing exactly what he wants to do, what more could you want? Or you think, that's no way to live, you know, being in your room all day, not talking to anyone, a slave to your work, you know. It can look one way or the other. And it's funny because I think that for every individual, I think there's two different ways that we kind of interpret how happy are we. There's comparing to your own life, and then comparing to the social construct, or like what you think happiness is supposed to look like. So for a lot of people, they have a time in their life when they were more happy than they currently are, and that kind of becomes their benchmark. That becomes their baseline. Ben Saint was just talking about this on the latest Procrastinators podcast when he, the graduation one, where he was saying that his senior year of college was kind of the good old days, because that was when he was the most socially active, was getting laid all the time, was having a good time, and he was like, when I compare my current self to then, like, there's clearly something missing in comparison, so I must not be as happy as I was then. For me, I've never had a time in my life where I was happier than I am now. There's nothing I have no grounds for comparison. That's why I always tell people that I'm happy. When people ask, I'm like, yeah, things are going great, because I can't even remember things being better than this. But on the social construct level, on the what my vision is of what like my life is supposed to be, I'm not there yet. Because in my vision of what my life is supposed to be, I have a girlfriend or a wife or maybe even kids. I want to have those things in the future. I want to have a family and my own place, a self-sustained living, which I could afford right now, but to me, it's like that comes later, like, I don't think it's important for me to be self-sustained right now, but it is an eventuality I want. I want to be living in a house with my wife and kid, not with a bunch of roommates, who I work with. I want them to be able to afford their own places. I want all of us to be able to afford our own place and to be stable living, in a neighborhood together kind of thing. That's my vision of what it would mean to really be happy. Not to say that I'm not happy now, but just that, like, that's the thing that I feel like I'm working towards, and that until I have it, I will never be convinced that this is the right way to live. Even though, for all intents and purposes, like, I'm doing what I want to do. There's nothing bad happening to me right now. There's nothing I'm like struggling with, but there's something I want, and I can't feel satisfied not having it. And the weirdest thing about it is that the thing I don't have is something I have no idea how to get. Like, I think when it came to this whole creative career, for a long time I didn't know how to get it. For a long time I was just sitting around on my ass, like, trying to figure something out. For all those years I spent as a NEET, or in high school or college, wishing I could be. The whole time I was in high school I wanted to drop out. The whole time I was in college I wanted to drop out. Eventually I did. The whole time, for a whole year and a half after that, I spent going, well, you dropped out, you're free, you've got all the time in the world, what are you doing? Where is this going, man? Where are you going with this? Is this gonna happen? Are you gonna do whatever the thing is? And then eventually I figured it out. I found the solution, and then I just worked at it constantly until I was there. And now I'm there, and I'm going, okay, well, I see the next peak. I see the next thing I want. And I do, like, it's not that I don't want more success. I do, and I especially want it for my friends. Like, for Devu. Devu needs more money. If you want to donate to my Patreon, and Devu's pointed this out in the comments on these before. He said, don't let Digi's complacency over money stop you from donating, because I still need money, Devu makes 40% of whatever I make on Patreon. So, if you give me more money, you're also paying him. And because I, A, make a little bit more, and B, I spend less than he does on food, oddly enough. Well, okay, not overall. I spend way more on, like, groceries and shit. I mean, on going out, he spends more on groceries. Okay, never mind. I spend way more money than he does, but I make a little bit more than him on Patreon, and I make ad revenue, and I, make Crunchyroll stuff, and I also, like, just have a big savings, because I save up lots of money. Devu needs money, so, by all means, continue contributing for his sake, and I can also pay more people if I have more money. But for me personally, in, like, terms of what I want out of my life, I'm not, like, hugely trying to get to the next money peak. If I was, you'd know, because my main channel would be bursting at the seams with content about current anime, the way that it was early this year. You know, early this year when I was making videos about Erased and Cabaneri and all that shit, like, and Myriad Colors Phantom World, that was all to grow the channel. You know, that was all, I need more money than I have right now. And then I made that much money and I went, alright, let's do whatever the fuck we want now. Shinbo in the 90s. No one watches it. Don't care. It's happening. You know? Let's make it 16 videos that no one's gonna watch. I don't fucking care. You know, it's for me. But if I did want my channel to grow, I know how to do that. It's easy. You just talk about relevant shit. You know, you just make videos at a quick rate about relevant subject matter. You're done. That's it. You know? Had I covered ReZero properly instead of as a plebe and weeb video, would probably have 5 times the views it has, you know. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted a plebe and weeb. I wanted that show to exist. It does. It's funded for a 2nd season. RadCon's coming in January. Huge deal, you know. So that's not what I'm looking for out of life right now. What I want is the other things. The relationship. The feeling of being on my own to some extent, of like being my own man kind of thing, which I mean I basically am, but I don't know, I want to get out there, you know, a little bit more. And that's the only part that like, if you ask me, are you happy, I'm gonna go, yeah, I'm happy, but I'm not satisfied. You know, and I don't think I ever will be. I don't think anyone ever is. You get to that next peak and you're just going to find something else. You know, there's got to be something else you want. But, so maybe I'm as happy as I ever will be. And that's really the debate that I constantly have with myself. It's like, I tell myself I want these other things, but I'm so convinced that once I get them, it's just going to be about chasing the next high. You know, it's never going to be, oh, I did it. I got it all. Now it's all cool. You know, that day's never coming. It's never coming for anybody. So it's just a fantasy. But I have to, you know, clinging to that's what keeps you going. Because if I just decided, well, this is as happy as I'll ever be, then it's like, what new things can I ever expect to be on the horizon? You know. And I realize these are all kind of cliched sentiments that you've probably heard before, but it's true, you know, and like I said, a story is nothing but sort of a re-encapsulation of the same ideas. And a lot of this is what that story that I'm working on, that I talked about in the earlier part of this podcast, is dedicated to exploring. Not in as direct terms as I've painted it, but I honestly think that this story I'm working on is kind of a fictionalization of the decompression chamber. It's a similar style of presentation. Well, not of presentation, but of ideas. Like, the kinds of things that the story will be exploring are the same kinds of things that I talk about on this podcast. It's really going to be dedicated to how this character, the main character of the story, like, thinks about their life, and how exploring what is going on in their life and what that ultimately means to them emotionally. And so not like most of what happens in this story is not particularly noteworthy. It's not so much about what happens as what that thing happening signifies about this person's personality, you know? It's not necessarily exciting for me to say, like, I did this thing. But when you think of it in the greater context of, like, how I think about that thing I did, that's where it becomes interesting, if you catch my drift. How about I put it this way? If I say, I watched Kill La Kill and I liked it, not a very interesting sentiment. But if I say, I watched Kill La Kill and I liked it because of, you know, how it made me think about something else, then that can be interesting. That's sort of vague, but that's what this story is kind of like. I don't want to give too much away about it, but I think that the audience who will be most primed to understand this game and where it's coming from, did I say game? This thing and where it's coming from, they will be the people who listen to this show. The people who listen to Decompression Chamber will probably most readily get exactly what this game... Bleh, why do I keep saying game? They will get exactly what this thing is. Ignore the fact that I said game, because that may be a mischaracterization. Nonetheless, you guys will get it. I'm repeating myself. I should be probably doing something right now. It's very humid in my room. I feel like shit physically, by the way. I'm just gonna talk about that a little bit. That for the past week, I felt like garbage. I've been smoking too much. I need to stop again. Because when that whole thing happened with the vape, where I broke the vape, and then I immediately, like, something clicked in my brain when I broke that vape, which it's been fixed now for a while. But when I broke it, something snapped. And the part of me that was like, I'm vaping to quit smoking, just stopped caring. Like, all these years, like 5 years of resistance to smoking full time, 5 years of smoking like once a day, maybe twice, and then quitting if I even get close to 3 times, that part of my brain just died when that vape broke. And I started smoking way more. And even after the vape was fixed, I have continued smoking. And now I am smoking more than I'm vaping. And it's like, it's gotten to the point where now it's starting to affect the way my brain feels. And I'm like, okay, hold on, that little worry guy is reforming. The guy who I killed when the vape broke, he's starting to come back to life and realize that this is a problem. I should not be smoking this much. So I'm gonna quit that again. That's gonna be rough, but you know, especially because it's gonna be rougher than ever before because I've been smoking more than ever before. But it needs to stop. After I finish this pack, I'm gonna go to just straight vaping and just, yeah, quit smoking again, because it's starting to affect the way my brain feels. I've also just not been eating well. Me and Ben haven't worked out in like 2 weeks. We just completely dropped the ball on that. It's been raining a lot, and I get headaches when it rains. That's a fucking obnoxious thing. And also, the weather is all the fuck over the place. It got really cold. It had finally gotten like winter cold. And I was like, I had considered stopping smoking then because it got so cold that standing outside sucked. So I was like, well, this is not fun anymore. You know, I'm gonna stop doing this. But then it suddenly got fucking way warm. Today it's like 70 or something. It's not even chilly outside. And it's December. So the weather's all over the fucking place. It won't stop raining. It's always wet. I've always got a fucking headache. Yeah, so I have felt physically completely off for like probably 5 or 6 days now, and that fucking sucks. That makes everything else difficult. I mean, thankfully, as I said in the first part of this, I work on such autopilot at this point that I can still get things done. It used to be, there was a time even in my video making career where if I felt off, I could not work. And that was kind of often, you know, like probably at least a day out of every week, I just felt not up to life. I just felt like either my stomach hurt or I had a headache or I just felt this sort of dysphoria with my own life, like not understanding who I am or why I'm here. And in that mood, I'm not good at creating things. But these days, I'm just so used to it that nothing can stop me. I mean, the last like 3 days, all 3 of those days individually, I thought, I'm not getting anything done today. I feel sick. And I slept for most of the day. And I still managed to make something because I can't help myself. Like, yesterday I'm like, I feel like shit, I don't want to do anything. I guess I'll just play Sword of Mana. I guess I'll edit this entire Handfuls of Zen video. I guess that's out. And then I went and passed out, like, immediately afterwards. I think I passed out listening to it. I think I put it on and did not survive the whole video. It was either that or something else that I listened to in the same way. I think it was that. I think I passed out listening to Handfuls of Zen. Gross. I feel terrible. But, you know, doesn't affect you guys. You still get content. And here's another thing. Please, guys, don't do this thing where you try to extrapolate more psychoanalysis out of the things I've said than what I've already presented. Because these shows I do, this is already a psychoanalysis of myself. And I've already come to conclusions about myself, and I'm presenting them here. And then I'll get people who comment things that kind of like take it a step further, but that's not how I feel. Like, I've already taken it as far as it can go. You know, this is already a full-blown examination of how I feel. So extrapolating more out of it can be bothersome. And here's an example of what I mean. Like, and I get this in response to a lot of the issues I bring up in my life, where people will say, it sounds like you're burned out. It sounds like you burned yourself out, like you've been doing too many of whatever it is. Like if I say I can't find any anime I really love, people say, well, it sounds like you burned out from watching too much anime. Or if I say I can't find any, like, you know, I'm getting stressed out from working so much, you burned out. If I was burned out, I'd say so. I know that feeling. I know what burning out feels like. I know what it's like to be sick of anime. You know, when I was reading all those comics, I was a little burned out on anime. Like, that was, and I said so. I was like, I'm kind of burned out on watching 7 out of 10s. I'm gonna watch or go read comics. Right now, I'm not burned out on anime. I haven't been fucking watching any for a little while. I just want to see a new favorite. You know, that's just something I want to experience. That's why I said so. I didn't say I'm burned out on anime. And when I talk about, anytime I talk about how many projects I'm doing, and like if I say something like I feel physically sick, people will say, maybe it's because of all the projects you're working on. But the thing is that that's a constant in my life. At times when I feel amazing, it's often attributable to the fact that I'm working on so many things at once. You know, the beginning of the Decompression Chamber, I was talking about how, like, yeah, man, I've been making 1,000 videos and working out and all this other stuff. I mean, this is just my lifestyle. I'm just super productive, and I feel way worse when I'm not making things. Like, in a lot of ways, my happiness and self-worth are tied to how many fucking things I can get done. So, the physical illness is definitely not a result of the overworking. It's a result of everything surrounding it. It's a result of a bad diet, not working out anymore, you know, frustrating climate. It never is the right temperature in my room, because when it gets cold, I put on the heat, but then the heat goes stronger to my room than it does to the rest of the house, so then it just gets really hot, then I turn it off, and it gets really fucking cold. There's no winning with the heat in my house. And then today, because of a situation I won't even get into, where I was on hold for an hour and a half trying to call into the Dick show, I fucking had my window open, and because I was stressed out because I've been vaping for half an hour, like non-stop, and then my fucking vape's battery died, so I smoked a cigarette in my room, and I had the windows open to let the smoke out, which did not work. I left them open for like an hour. Room's still full of smoke, and it's humid as shit because I had the window open and it's been raining, so now I've got like maximum humidity in here. So that's why I feel physically wrong. You know, it has nothing to do with the work. It's the work environment. It's how I treat myself and my body and how the weather treats me, you know. Those are the reasons I feel sick. So I know that people worry about me sometimes, and sometimes that's okay. Worry about me for the reasons stated, not for the other reasons that you've read into it, because believe me, I know how to psychoanalyze myself. You know, it's something I've been doing my whole life, and I've been to psychologists, I've been through all the rigmarole, I've studied psychology. I think I know what's wrong with me better than anyone, you know, and when I feel something's wrong, I state it. I state what I think is wrong. And that's not to say I share absolutely everything, but, you know, you're not, if it's something I'm not sharing, you're not going to extrapolate it from the things I've said, you know. So, yeah, that's just something I find a little bit annoying. It's not that big a deal, because I know it's well-meaning. I know people just want to help, but I do feel like when someone says, oh, it sounds like you're doing this, I'm like, no, I'm doing what I said I was doing. You know, the problem is exactly as stated. And so much of it is because people are reading in what would be the problem for them. You know, it's always someone saying, like, I especially get this when people, like, have the really far-reaching ones, where it's like some kind of mental issue they think I might have, where it's always exactly the one they have, you know, or, like, Digi, I know you're probably burning out because I burn out all the time. And I'm like, yeah, that's you. You know, I get it, but it's a little annoying. Anyway, that's enough for that point. I'll probably record one more section of this at some point and release it later because PCP came out today. I don't want to sandwich the releases together, even though this is an hour already. But, you know, maybe I'll have something else to talk about tomorrow. Who knows? Oh, baby. I sure am glad that I decided to hold off on releasing this podcast, because if I got a story for you guys, a fun little piece of schadenfreude for all you fucking tech geeks out there who are going to lose your shit hearing this little what I spent 6 hours on today. Oh god. So you know, in light of me trying to become a draw boy, I decided to buy a tablet. And not just any tablet, but a one with a screen. the big boy expensive tablets. You know, I had a Wacom Bamboo that I bought way back in, like, when I worked at Target. It was one of the first things I bought, because when I first started making videos for YouTube, I thought I was going to teach myself to do animations because I wanted to be Egoraptor and do sequelitis. Didn't really work out. I didn't end up using the tablet much, and eventually it stopped working after sitting in Shade's room for a couple of years and getting abused. It doesn't work anymore. So I decided I wanted to buy one of these ones at the screen, partly because fellow PCP member Tom, who runs the Rebel Pixels channel, has been doing all these videos on Cintiq alternatives, all these, you know, tablets with screens that are that don't cost as much. So he just put out a holiday buyer's guide. His mid-range one was the D13, the Artisan, and so I bought one for $500. And it showed up. It's fucking massive. It's way bigger than I thought it was gonna be. It's beautiful. So I decided to try and hook it up. Now, the Artisan, it has this driver. You know, you have to install a driver to make it work. But the driver will not install unless you don't have any other tablet drivers on your computer. So I'm trying to install this driver, and it's not working. It keeps telling me that it's detecting another tablet driver. So I start going... This took hours of going ape shit through my computer trying to find these fucking tablet drivers, because they're not in the uninstall list. They're not in my programs list. I uninstalled drivers for like every device that had ever been plugged into my computer that wasn't currently plugged into it. You know, I went and found all the hidden drivers. I'm saying all this because I know that someone listening who's a tech expert is gonna say, well, did you try this? Did you try that? Yes. I spent hours Googling everything you can possibly do and trying everything. Now, the only thing that's anywhere in my computer that I could find that even resembles a tablet driver is this Windows driver. It's like part of a Windows driver pack, and it says graphics tablet on it. So I was like, okay, this seems to be it. But if you try to uninstall that, it's in the uninstall list, but when you try to uninstall it, it says that it doesn't exist. It says you don't even have this thing on your computer. I don't know why it's listed in the uninstall list, but it claims I don't even have it. And it would give me this error message. You know, I'm searching around. I find other people who've had the same issue, but no one's really resolved it. And I'm looking at all this information about how to uninstall drivers. So what I end up doing is going into the command prompt, getting a drivers list as a text file, fucking, you know, control-Fing my way through there and finding anything that says tablet on it. And there were two different things, but they're both System32 drivers, right? So I go into System32, I learn how to change permissions on files, and I go into the drivers, and I delete two of them. First one, nothing changed. Second one, nothing changes in regards to the tablet, but I now can't connect to the internet. So what I believe I did was I misread the drivers list and uninstalled or deleted some other driver, And of course, I didn't know about system restore before doing any of this, so I didn't set a restore point for my computer, which would have solved this whole problem. Well, at least it wouldn't have solved the weird tablet driver problem, but it would have not made it so I just uninstalled or deleted a System32 file that makes it so I can't connect to the internet, and no one's sure why. And there's no way to replace it or anything. Turns out, manipulating System32 files, such an uncommon occurrence that no one on the internet has help for it. You can't just download System32 drivers and put them on your computer. That's not a thing, apparently. What I start doing is taking all the drivers from my laptop System32, put those on a flash drive, put them all in my computer. Didn't help. This is over the course of hours, by the way. At this point, I've got Shade helping me. Shade's got Windows 7, but even after changing permissions, I can't write any of his system files onto a flash drive for some reason. It won't give me permission. Eventually, I remember, hey, wait a minute. My computer is partitioned between two different solid-state drives. At the time, I'd forgotten the other one was solid-state, but because when my computer was built, it had a 250 gigabyte solid-state drive, and I later wanted to upgrade to a terabyte one. So I've been using the terabyte, but there's a 250 gig one that's still in there, and it still has all the... It's exactly as it was before I bought the new one. You know, we didn't delete anything off of it or anything. Thank God, because originally I was going to format it, and my tech friend was just like, let's not, and you know, just in case something goes wrong, we'll wait a few weeks and then we'll do it. And I never did. So thank fuck I never formatted the other hard drive, because we couldn't just boot for whatever reason. My fucking DOS has a password, and I don't know what it is, and it's not the password of anything else on my computer. So, couldn't get into DOS, so we had to open up the computer and fucking change the damn cords around, all so that I could boot off of my old solid-state drive. And I tried copying the System32 files from the old solid-state to the new one. That didn't work either. Nothing worked. So now my main SSD just can't connect to the internet, and no one knows why. So I'm probably going to have to reinstall Windows on that one, which, you know, I don't want to fucking go to the process of backing up everything and reinstalling Windows now, especially if that doesn't even help the problem, because even after all of this, I never solved the tablet problem. I never solved the issue of it still thinking it has tablet drivers. So finally, and in the meantime, amidst all this happening, I plugged the tablet into my laptop, and it worked instantly. You know, like, I got the drivers on there, it's perfect. And so I already know the thing works. It works just fine. It's just something, whatever reason, my main SSD has this problem. So we routed to the other SSD. It works on that one. I fucking had to deal with, still, even though the driver's installed, it still took me half an hour to get the fucking thing to detect the pen for some reason. Eventually, it was just like a matter of switching which USB port it was plugged into. God. It was a waking nightmare. 6 hours it took before I got this thing working on my computer. And even still, it's at the caveat of I now am just using my old solid-state drive. I now just have, now the 1 terabyte is the partitioned one, you know. Just, I mean, thank God nothing worse happened with me fucking with System32 files. It could have been much worse. And, you know, and thankfully the partition is easily enough that I can just copy, like, you know, I just had to copy the decompression chamber from the other SSD to this one. And, of course, this SSD is from, like, you know, I changed them, like, early in the year, so it's got all these, like it's missing a bunch of programs that I now use, and has all this stuff that has to be changed. It remembers all my old passwords and stuff, so I have to fucking update everything now. Huge fucking pain in the ass, but at least I got the damn thing working. Christ. Oh God. I am the biggest idiot in the world. I fucking, immediately after I finally got it to work, I rushed out, because I was just like fuming. I could not contain my rage at this point. And I was like, I need to eat. I was hungry, had, you know, been sitting there for 6 hours working on this thing. So I immediately went out to Arby's, bought some big ass shit, which was disgusting. I don't know why I did that. Then I had a cigarette. Now I'm having a beer. It's like somehow the fact that I had failed so badly meant I had to continue the failure and just like make it like, if I'm this retarded, I might as well go full in and just eat fast food and smoke a cigarette and have a beer and just destroy myself. I need to die now. Ugh. God. I guess I've had worse tech problems in the past. This is the worst one in a while, though. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little story. I needed that. I needed the decompression. This became a real decompression chamber at the very end here, where I actually needed to decompress. Not that telling that story, like, I mean, it's just there for you to laugh at me, and there's no silver lining to it, but I guess I just needed to vent. And now I'm remembering I can't get drunk yet because I got to go pick up Devu at the airport in like 4 hours. So I guess I'll just drink half of this beer and leave it around. See you in the next one.